July 20th, 2025. Hong Kong's skyline disappears behind a wall of wind and rain. For the first time in 2 years, the city's observatory issues its highest possible warning, signal number 10. Typhoon Wipha is here, and it's about to remind millions of people across Asia just how powerful nature can be. But this isn't just another weather story. This is the story of how a perfect storm, both literally and figuratively, came together to create one of the most destructive typhoons in recent memory. And more importantly, it's a story about why storms like Wipha are becoming more frequent, more intense, and more dangerous. To understand what happened in July 2025, we need to go back to where it all began, the warm waters of the South China Sea. Picture this, thousands of square miles of ocean, heated by the summer sun to temperatures that would make a hot tub seem cool. The sea surface temperatures were unusually warm that summer, several degrees above normal. Now, you might think a few degrees doesn't matter much, but in the world of typhoon formation, it's the difference between a gentle rain shower and a city-destroying monster. Here's how it works. Warm water evaporates, sending massive amounts of moisture into the atmosphere. As this warm, moist air rises, it begins to cool and condense, releasing enormous amounts of energy, the same energy that powers these devastating storms. But heat alone doesn't make a typhoon. You need spin. Thanks to the Earth's rotation, this rising air begins to twist and spiral. It's called the Coriolis effect, and it's what transforms a simple thunderstorm into a rotating engine of destruction. By mid-July, all the ingredients were in place. The South China Sea was like a loaded gun, and atmospheric conditions were about to pull the trigger. What started as a small area of disturbed weather quickly organized into tropical storm Wipha, then rapidly intensified into a typhoon with winds exceeding 117 kilometers per hour. But here's where the story takes a dangerous turn. Instead of following the typical path that would take it safely out to sea, Wipha was being steered by large-scale atmospheric patterns directly towards some of the most densely populated coastlines in the world. Hong Kong, 7.5 million people living on a small peninsula surrounded by water. It's one of the world's great cities, but when it comes to typhoons, geography is not on its side. The city sits right in the path of the South China Sea's typhoon highway. Most years they get brushed by a few storms, but direct hits from major typhoons are relatively rare. That's what made July 20th so significant. As Wipha approached, meteorologists at the Hong Kong Observatory faced a difficult decision. The storm was intensifying rapidly, and computer models showed it passing dangerously close to the city. At 5:20 a.m. on July 20th, they made the call that would affect millions of lives. Signal number 10, the highest typhoon warning possible. To put this in perspective, Hong Kong had only issued this warning once in the previous 2 years, during Super Typhoon Saola in 2023, which injured 86 people and toppled thousands of trees. The T10 signal means one thing: take shelter immediately, because winds of 118 kilometers per hour or more are about to hit. The city transformed overnight. Construction cranes were secured, windows were boarded up, and the usually bustling streets emptied, as 8 million people hunkered down to wait out the storm. Hong Kong International Airport, one of the world's busiest, ground to a halt. Over 500 flights were canceled outright, with another 400 delayed or rescheduled. Thousands of travelers found themselves stranded. But that was the least of the city's worries, because at 10 a.m. local time, Wipha's eye wall, the most destructive part of any typhoon, was just 60 kilometers southeast of Hong Kong, and it was moving fast. When Wipha struck Hong Kong, it brought with it the full fury of nature unleashed. Sustained winds of 87 miles per hour, with gusts reaching 104 miles per hour, turned the city into a war zone. The southern part of Hong Kong bore the brunt of the storm's eye wall. Building facades cracked, windows shattered, and debris became deadly projectiles flying through the air at highway speeds. Emergency services received over 450 reports of fallen trees across the city. More than 24 people were injured, though miraculously, no one was killed. Over 250 people sought shelter in government-run emergency centers, riding out the storm in schools and community centers. But Hong Kong was just the beginning. As Wipha moved northwest, it set its sights on mainland China, where nearly 700,000 people were about to face the storm's full power. In Guangdong province, authorities had learned from past disasters. They weren't taking any chances. Coastal communities were evacuated en masse. Fishing boats were ordered back to port. Offshore oil workers were brought to safety, and entire towns were essentially emptied as people moved to higher ground. At 5:50 p.m. on July 20th, Wipha made landfall near Taishan in Guangdong province. Even though it had weakened slightly, it still packed winds close to 99 miles per hour, strong enough to tear roofs off buildings and turn cars into battering rams. The storm dumped over 4 inches of rain in just a few hours, overwhelming drainage systems and turning streets into rivers. But the most heartbreaking chapter of this story was still to come. Vietnam's Halong Bay is one of the world's most beautiful places, a UNESCO World Heritage Site where limestone pillars rise from emerald waters like something from a fairy tale. It's also a major tourist destination, with boats carrying families and visitors through its scenic waters every day. On July 20th, as Wipha's outer bands whipped up dangerous seas, a tourist boat carrying families capsized in the bay's suddenly treacherous waters. At least 36 people died, with several still missing. It was a stark reminder that typhoons kill not just through wind and rain, but through the secondary effects that ripple out from the storm's center. Wipha's influence extended far beyond its direct path. In the Philippines, nearly 370,000 people were affected as the storm intensified monsoon rains. South Korea experienced severe flooding that killed 18 people. Even Taiwan and Japan felt the storm's effects through flooding and transportation disruptions. In total, across the entire region, Wipha affected millions of people, killed dozens, and caused billions of dollars in damage. But perhaps the most important question isn't what happened, it's why it happened, and why storms like this are becoming more common. Here's what the meteorologists and climate scientists know, but don't always say directly. Typhoon Wipha wasn't just a random act of nature. It was nature responding to a world that we fundamentally changed. Remember those unusually warm sea surface temperatures I mentioned earlier? They're not unusual anymore. They're becoming the new normal. The South China Sea, like oceans around the world, has been steadily warming for decades due to climate change. Warmer oceans mean more evaporation. More evaporation means more moisture in the atmosphere. More moisture means more fuel for storms. It's a simple equation with devastating consequences. Meteorologists studying the region have noticed a troubling trend. Typhoons in the South China Sea are not only becoming more frequent, they're also becoming more intense and following different paths than they used to. In the past, many typhoons would curve away from the coast and dissipate harmlessly over the open ocean. But changing atmospheric circulation patterns, also linked to climate change, are now steering more storms directly toward populated coastlines. There's another factor making these storms more dangerous: us. Coastal cities like Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and others have grown exponentially in recent decades. More people living in harm's way means more potential for catastrophe when storms like Wipha strike. We've built our modern world assuming that the climate would remain stable, that storms would follow predictable patterns, that the ocean would stay within historical bounds. Wipha showed us how dangerous those assumptions have become. In the days following Wipha's passage, something remarkable happened. Communities came together. Emergency services worked around the clock. Infrastructure was rebuilt, stronger than before. Hong Kong's early warning system worked exactly as designed. The T10 signal gave people time to prepare, and that preparation saved lives. Evacuation procedures in mainland China, refined through years of experience with typhoons, moved nearly 750,000 people to safety. But the real lesson of Typhoon Wipha isn't about emergency preparedness. It's about prevention. Scientists around the world are studying storms like Wipha to understand how our changing climate is reshaping these natural disasters. Their findings are sobering. If current trends continue, we can expect more storms like Wipha, more intense, more unpredictable, and more dangerous. The warm ocean temperatures that fueled this typhoon aren't going away. They're likely to get worse, but there's hope in human ingenuity. Cities are adapting, building better seawalls, improving drainage systems, developing more accurate forecasting models. Countries are investing in renewable energy to address the root causes of climate change. Perhaps most importantly, Wipha demonstrated the power of international cooperation. Weather data was shared across borders, rescue operations coordinated between countries, and aid flowed to where it was needed most. Today, life has largely returned to normal across the regions affected by Typhoon Wipha. Hong Kong's streets are busy again. flights are running on schedule, and the tourists have returned to Halong Bay. But Wipha left behind more than just physical damage. It left behind a warning, a glimpse of what our future might look like if we don't take seriously the ways we're changing our planet's climate system. The people who lived through Wipha, the families who huddled in shelters as 100-mile-per-hour winds howled outside, the emergency workers who risked their lives to save others, the communities that came together in the aftermath. They understand something that the rest of us are still learning. Nature isn't just a backdrop to human civilization. It's an active participant, responding to everything we do. When we warm the oceans, nature responds with stronger storms. When we change atmospheric chemistry, nature responds with shifting weather patterns. Typhoon Wipha happened because we live on a dynamic planet where everything is connected. Oceans, atmosphere, land, and the 7 billion people trying to make their lives on this small blue marble spinning through space. The question isn't whether there will be another Wipha. There will be. The question is whether we'll be ready for it, whether we'll have the wisdom to address not just the symptoms of our changing climate, but the causes. In the end, every typhoon is a reminder that we're not separate from nature. We're part of it. What we do to our planet does to us.